Okay, hello and welcome, Pastor Karen. So we are going to pick up where we left off with our decision making models. And we may be able to get through the end of these today. So we're going to pick up with what are called diminishing returns. Is this something you're familiar with? Have you heard about this before?
I think I have the general concept,
General
but
concept. Okay, cool. So one of the things that I'm going to sit up just a little bit. I'm kind of short right now. Um, that many ministry leaders, I would say the majority of ministry leaders believe as a belief about reality is that results are linear. So if I put in 10 hours into the ministry, I'm going to get, let's say on our asymmetric outcome, like I put in 10 hours of resources, which is a resource, right? Our time, I'm going to get 20 resources out because, whatever that means. So I'm getting an increase. And so, well, if I put in another 10 hours, then I'm going to get 40. And I put in another 10 hours and I'm going to get 60. So I'm just doubling and I'm doubling. But the problem is that life does not, the reality does not reward symmetrically. At some point, you hit actual limitations. And so, one example of this is we have some clients that do e-com over here at ClickMail, and they have small niche markets. And so it's like we're spending 500 a month and they're making 12 times return on investment, which is crazy. That's 120 times bigger than the stock market. If you invested and got 10% a year, that's super good. Well, they're getting 120 times bigger than that. They're getting 12x. And it's like, well, can we spend more? Can we get more? It's like, yes, we can put more in, but what's the lowest return you want? And they're like, well, let's see why. Like, why would we go down? Because you're going to start buying all of the interest on the internet in your market. And the question is, how much in is there? Because there's a lot of free clicks to be purchased in these advertisements. But at some point, there won't be any free left because you're buying them all. Then you're going to start competing with what other people are buying, and it's going to get more and more expensive, which is going to bring down and down your profit, which is fine because to some degree, because you're going to be reaching way more people and you're doubling your money. Like you're going to be all right. But what is the number? Is it 1.5x? Is it 2x? Is it 5x? Where do you want to be? And then we scale the spend, but you can only scale so far because at some point you spend so much you don't make any money. So you're actually losing money. So you have to find the point of diminishing returns that you're willing to accept. And then you have to find a new strategy. So the first, the first thing is like, oh, well, every time we increase the spend on the ads, we make more money. So let's just increase it forever. That would be a normal ministry model. So it's like, oh, when we go downtown and we hold our signs and say Jesus loves you, people come to church. Well, it's like that might work for once a week or once a month, but if you just do it every day, everybody who's going to see you already saw you and it's not going to make any bigger difference. And as a matter of fact, it might actually reverse at some point. It's like, man, those people like, they never let it go. Just like take a break. And maybe it actually leads to less people coming in. This is also true with the effort and time we put into our own ministries in the way we're putting it in, just showing up and grinding out the tasks on overwhelm. 40 hours a week might be sustainable, but if you're pushing 60 or 80 during the holiday seasons, you're going to be exhausted. And the work you were doing at 40 will be higher quality than the work you're doing at hour 70, to the point where it's actually deconstructive and you're going to be losing stuff by investing more time. So you have to figure out the point at which it's no longer linear growth and it actually starts to plateau or drop. And you have to realize more. And I would say it like this: you can work longer, you can work harder, and you can work smarter. And what pastors believe is if I work longer and I work harder, the growth will just continue linearly forever. And it's not true. At some point, it's going to plateau or start to drop, and you got to stop and you got to find a new option. And that's why pastors burn out, because they just think longer and harder forever. So you have to define the point at which the returns begin to diminish and then find a new strategy. Okay. So in an advertising account, and again, this is just an example because I see this every day. In an advertising account, okay, You're making 12x return, you're spending 500 a month in your, whatever business. We're going to scale that. We're going to tack on another 500. And then it drops to, say, a 10x return. Add another 500, 8x return. Add another 500. Okay, 6x is minimum. We want to have that. Great. So now you're spending 2,500. You're making 6x and you're stuck because you're no longer okay with the diminishing returns that comes with more scale. So then what is the new way to scale? Okay, well, we're only advertising in the US. Are there other countries that you could open this up to increase the number of people you can reach? Because we can do it again with another country. And if they can ship internationally, then that's an option. Or maybe there are other places to advertise other than Google that will increase. And so then you're looking at working smarter as opposed to working harder. Another example of diminishing returns is you're trying to get volunteers in your church. Maybe this is more specific. Oh my gosh, well, we have so much work. I'm burning out. I can't keep up with this. We need volunteers. We need volunteers to come in and, work for the Lord with us. And then we just dump all that on them. And then they're getting exhausted and they're feeling unappreciated and they're going out the back door because they're like, man, I'm out of here. It's been 6 months and I'm still carrying garbage around and nobody's even thanked me. And so what happens? We go back to the front door and now we've got volunteers trying to recruit volunteers at the front door. And it's like at some point you run out of people who are willing to try the volunteer thing when everybody knows nobody likes volunteering at the ministry. So instead of pushing that system harder and harder and harder, you have to change the system and say, how do we actually incentivize the volunteers to want to be here? And then that goes back to our prior calls where it's like, you give the resources to the people who are most committed. And that seems like what happened in the Acts church. And then you don't have to work hard at all because on the front end, it's like exhausting because you're training, the volunteers want to be you. You're training the volunteers the Bible, you're training them sermon prep, you're letting them come into the church on the weekdays and you're showing them how to lead Bible studies and prepare this and do that. And it's exhausting. But then what happens is they're feeling filled. And what do they do? Just like I believe in Matthew 4, where it says that the people went all over Syria and got their friends and brought them back. Well, why? Because Jesus is meeting their needs. He's healing them. He doesn't have to do any marketing. He doesn't have to try to get them. They're going across a desert on foot and grabbing their friends and like, you've got to meet this guy. Well, if the inside of your church meets needs of your volunteers that well, they'll go get everyone they know and be like, you've got to come volunteer with me. This is the greatest place ever. And then the cool thing is, if you do it well and you train your volunteers on the actual inner workings of ministry, you're preparing them to be ministers, which is kind of the point. And then also you can just delegate tasks because what are you going to have them do? The stuff you do. And so it's like, okay, we've been doing sermon prep for 4 months. You've done 4 months of sermons with me. You've seen how I do it. We've done it together. Now you go do a sermon and I'm going to let you preach it and I'll give you some feedback before you do, And now you've got people helping you with sermons for some number of weeks out of the year. Well, oh my gosh, can you believe it? I volunteer at my church and my pastor helps me to learn how to write sermons. And then she lets me preach from the stage. I'm going to be a pastor and they're all excited. And you're like, I just run a team of like, I literally right now, I run a team of like 5 interns that do like 150 hours a week. And all I do is just manage their work and they're super excited about it. So that's, you restructure because the point of diminishing returns, I can only work on so many accounts until I need a new system. So that's diminishing returns. And when the returns stop coming in at the rate they did, you probably plateaued the ability and you need to retool the system to then scale. And then what happens is once you open up a new system, a new level of scale, the returns will go up often exponentially and you'll hit another plateau where now your system still can't handle more. And like, so for example, we took, I think a 5th intern and it's like, we're also looking at having more clients come in for marketing. And it's like, I can't train interns for 10 hours a week and review their work and set up these clients. So it's now something has to go because my system is at its max. And so what happens, I'm going to go to my most advanced intern who's very capable and say, do you want a job running all the interns and managing all this stuff? because I may need to dip out for 2 months to get these new clients set up. And that is a new system, but I have to be able to lose stuff to take more stuff, if that makes sense. So diminishing returns, it's not linear forever. All right. Any questions or thoughts on that?
No, definitely been in that position, so I get it.
You get it. Okay, cool. Okay, so we got diminishing returns. So now it's critical mass. Are we familiar with this concept at all? Ever heard of this? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is pretty common. Okay. And this doesn't really take too much explanation, but I think in the early phases of starting something, either for you with a ministry, with like a new program in your church or something, or just anybody watching who is trying to start a Christian venture, start a church, start a Christian business from scratch, it is a slow grind at the beginning. And it takes a certain amount of time to sort of get the ball to the top of the hill so it starts rolling over. And critical mass is right when the ball's at the top of the hill and it starts tipping over and then it starts rolling down the other side. And you don't know what happened because all of a sudden all this weight's gone and now you're actually just kind of sprinting to keep up with the whole thing. So that is critical mass. And what I would like to show here is we just said reality is not linear when it comes to growth. Okay. And so what I want to show you is exponential. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to just look up an image. Again, in these images, credit to whoever made the image. Here, where did that go? I just saw it. Here, I like this one. This is a good representation of this. Okay, so you're growing and it's just you, it's just you, it's just you, it's just you. But now it cannot be just you. And it doesn't have to be two people. It could be an automation, an email automation. It could be an AI. It could be like there's any number of ways. It could be a VA, a virtual assistant who just helps you with digital stuff and it's, relatively affordable. But if you don't scale, the growth doesn't go up more. It just plateaus or ultimately maybe drops off if it's just too much. Okay. So pastors just try to scale, but they don't ever want or can't sometimes get more people or automate things. So we want to scale. But what happens is as it scales, it becomes exponential. And so the more you scale, the more you'll have to scale because of the Matthew principle to he who is given, or what do I say? To the one who does not have, take from him and give it to the one who has. And this is a nature of the world we live in economics. This is just known as the Matthew principle in secular economics. The reason why we'll say opportunity broadly, because it can be any number of things, wealth or power or whatever, it centralizes at the top because the nature of reality is that the blessing goes to the people who can handle it. And that's just basically Proverbs. And so as the blessing increases, you have to learn new skills. And what I'm getting lost here. What is the exact one we're looking at? Oh, critical mass. So critical mass. So I say like the ball's rolling over the top of the hill. Well, in this case, you're pushing, you're pushing, you're pushing, you're pushing. And then at some point, you're just pushing this up the hill. Well, jet fuel, just like there's adoption. People are like, oh, I like this. And they just start showing up. And then it sort of just takes off. And then it gets faster and faster. But what people don't realize, again, because when they're starting a ministry or they're starting a Christian business or something, is it's just really, really hard. And they don't realize that it's not hard forever. At some point, you just grind enough and it'll go, assuming you've assessed the market correctly and people actually want the thing, whatever it is. So with that, there is, when we start a ministry or a program in our church or our Christian business, a new service, the question is how much time are we and resources are we willing to invest to get to the point of critical mass? And if we can't get there in a reasonable amount of time, whatever that is, then we cut it. And so, for example, in the book It by Craig Groeschel, it being growth, passion, Holy Spirit movement, whatever you want to call it, he didn't really define it in the book, but you kind of get the picture. He said, we've got 4 services, and I don't remember if it's Life Church or which one, but he had 25 churches, I think, at the point of writing the book. And he goes, we only offer 4 things, and there are no Bible studies. There are no kids things. There's a Sunday service and then like 3 other things, but they're very targeted at the needs of the community. And, I think he's got over like 50 mega church campuses now. So it obviously works. But he said, we'll try anything, but if it does not produce X fruit in 90 days, it's gone. So they immediately assess fruit and then cut. And so they are only left with a highly efficient, lean ministry. What do you want to say? Machine, I guess, if I'm rhyming. And that produces fruit. So it is biblical and it produces more fruit than what they had before. So that would be critical mass. And so it's like, how long and how much can we invest to get it to the point of takeoff before we're unwilling to, or it's unsustainable to continue investing into that ministry endeavor. So that is critical mass. Okay, next is compounding. And so with compounding, the, I think, important thing is that, okay, good. The important thing with compounding is that it's firstly, it's the most powerful of all of these sort of things that happen in real life. It's the most powerful, but the problem is it's the least seen because it takes so long. So for example, Berkshire Hathaway with Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and I think, Charlie just recently passed and now Warren Buffett's running the company, but they started and they had like $500 million prior to 60. And so, it's like they're just really wealthy. But from 60 to 80, they went up to like $80 billion worth valuation. And so it's like, well, hold on. So you see the 80-20 principle playing in the compounding. So it's like the first 50 years they're doing it, or 30 years or whatever, they make 500 million. And then the last 20 years, they go from 500 to 80 billion. That's crazy. And so that's the exponential nature of reality. It's just shooting straight up because people realize the value they've created. But the compounding happens slowly, 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 and then a little more and a little more. And then 50 years down the road, the world is a totally different place, uh, or the kingdom of heaven, totally different landscape because of all of the people that are there. But the requirement to reach the point where the compounding is making the fruit that you want is you have to stay in the game long enough. And so a lot of ministry leaders really mistake how reality works, and they say, I'm just going to dump, 60, 80 hours into ministry and just we're going to make it grow and we're going to make it grow. You can't make a tree grow. You got to wait. And that's the compounding. Where does the fruit come from after the maturity? I got an uncle who planted trees, not an uncle, I guess a grandfather. My grandmother remarried uh, after my grandfather passed, so sort of a grandfather, but he planted trees in his 20s on this big piece of land, and they're some kind of nut trees, I don't know, but they take like 20 years to fruit. And so he's just broke most of his life, and he's just having someone tend those trees, and then they start fruiting, and he's got a gajillion dollars. I don't even know. And it's some kind of mansion and overlooking the trees. And so it just took a long time, but all of that growth slowly compounded, and then they started fruiting. Well, the same thing is true kind of biblically and kingdom mindedly. It can take a long time for a ministry or a ministry leader to get a program or a church running, but you get 50 years in, you get 20 years in, and you start seeing the fruit. Well, the fruit then matures and goes and creates more fruit. And so maybe you only bring one person to Jesus, but they come in a radical way and then they go change the world. And in 100 years, you're gone, but there are still people, showing up in heaven because of the compounding. Well, ministry leaders burn themselves out like in 3 years or 5 years. So they're not there long enough to reap the rewards that the compounding brings. It would be better to be okay with slower growth over a long period of time because it grows faster and faster the longer you're in it because you learn from your mistakes. And not only that, with the Matthew principle, to those who have uh, to those who do not have, take from them and give it to those who have. The pastors who cannot and the churches who cannot sustain over a long period to let the compounding, all of the people who should have been in those churches have to flow to somewhere. So it is given to the people who can just sustain. So simply by not failing the ministry. You don't have to grow. Just because you're there means you'll get growth. And so saying, what are my actual limitations in real life? Am I getting 8 hours of sleep? Am I eating healthy? Is my stress level under control? Can I be okay if things don't work out in the short run? Short run's going to be tough. Long run will be great. And allow the compounding to take place. And all you got to do is just hang on for the ride, and you're already a winner. So that's compounding. Any thoughts or questions on compounding?
I feel like I'm living that right now.
Good. Well,
Again, so yeah.
I was just reading this awesome book. It's in, which one was it? I'm making it a point to actually finish books. And my buddy Jonathan got me a book for Christmas, and now I got to get into that. I can't even remember which one it was. Anyway, we'll skip it. But yeah, just compounding. You just want to stick in for the long haul, and just by default, you'll be the only person there to take the blessing. That's just being faithful and consistent. So, okay. So the next is probability. And this is one of my favorites because I think this really illuminates scripture from because, ministry leaders are often like super heavy on faith. And I'm always just pushing like, all right, faith is great and God's going to bless, but let's get to work because, just because I have faith doesn't mean I need to be sitting around eating potato chips and praying for miracles. Like that's great, but let's also do our part. Probability is the likelihood of success. And what you want to do is you just want to increase the likelihood, or when you say increase God's ability to bless you. And I want to clarify because I'm not saying that very clearly. In the Bible, we see that there are 4 soils, and we see that when we plant on certain soils, there's growth. So the good soils where the growth gets, but there's like no growth on the other soils, essentially. Okay, well, when you go into ministry, you go into a Christian business, you don't know where the soil is, right? The parable is absurd because having grown up in Kansas, and I've seen like how they used to farm in the olden days, you hold your seed here, and this is the most expensive part of your farm. The seed is the expensive part. You don't just like take the valuable seed and just throw it into the air and you're like, some for the road, some for the thorns. Like you would be out of your mind. You would not be a farmer for very long. Farmers know where the good soil is and they throw it into the good soil. When we go into ministry, we don't know who is going to be specifically receptive to our message. And so we do throw on the road, but common sense builds on that and says, stop throwing your seed on the road, figure out where the good soil is, and then sow into the good soil. And that's different for every ministry. The Salvation Army speak to the deeply impoverished and people who struggle with addictions. My ministry here talks to ministry leaders and Christian entrepreneurs who are already mature in their faith. Like if I go talk to new baby Christians, they're going to think salvation is works or something. They're not going to hear it right. So we have to sow into the right soil. Well, when we say get to it, get to work, sow in the right soil so you can create growth, the response is, well, one man plants and another waters, but God creates the growth. And the implication there is, well, the growth is miraculous. So, just throw the seeds in the air, let them land where they want, and then God will just sort of miraculously provide whenever he wants to. And it's like, yes and no. But if you think, how do I say this? If you think that you put 100 seeds on the good soil when you figure it out, and that's part of that slow exponential growth process is figuring out where the good soil is. You're going to spend 10 years figuring that out. Once you figure it out, then you only put the seeds on the good soil. Okay, well, what percentage of those are going to grow? Is it 3%? Is it 1%? God's going to bless with growth, but he's also going to bless proportionately to your faithful action. And that's how this works. Like even on the 4 soils, God's blessing growth on 25% there. Well, what happens when you get all the seeds in the good soil? Let's just call it 5 out of 100. 5% of the people you share the gospel with are going to receive it and accept it and then grow into an authentic, genuine, deep-rooted Christian faith. Because do we know which people God is going to bless? No, God is going to provide the growth. do I know, and can I literally just look at a spreadsheet with numbers of the people who have actually come through and grown from the number we've shared with or invited to church or whatever? Yeah, it's 5 out of 100. We tracked it. We've tracked it with 20,000 people. It's 5%. Oh, so if you just sow more seed, you will see more growth. That's what you reap, what you sow means. So do you get to pick which seeds grow? No, God picks those and he blesses. But you do get to determine the amount of reaping you get to do later by the amount of sowing you do now. And I think a great example of this in scripture is just direct. And it's when the woman went to Elisha and I forget exactly what's happening, but they're her and her son are destitute or something, and they don't have any money and something like that. But she's like, "We need help," and he said, "Okay, go and collect all the pots from your neighbors." And she's like, "Okay," and she does it. And then how much blessing did God give her? And it was exactly proportionate to her effort, exactly proportionate to the top of the very last pot. Well, what happens if she had gotten the cart and gone down the road and gotten more? Probably it would have been that much. And what if she'd only brought two or three? It probably would have been that much. And so we work with God, and the more I sow, the more he will bless with growth. I don't know where he's going to bless. I just know that a year down the road or 2 years down the road, some probably, but it's 5% growth rate, 1%. If I want 100 clients and I bring in 10 out of 100 attempts, I know I just need to have 1,000 attempts. And so the question becomes, how do I get 1,000 attempts so God will bless faithful action? And so there is a probabilistic argument for growth, and it's totally within the bounds of Scripture. God does provide the growth, and He provides the growth proportionate to your faithful action and work with Him. Whatever, even if it's super improbable, it's still there. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay. Okay, so next is inversion. I want to make sure we discussed this. I have been moving things around, as I've told you.
I don't remember.
Okay, I really love this one. This one's actually from Charlie Munger. He talks a lot about, or spoke a lot about the mental models he used to assess investment decisions, and we're investing in the kingdom, same world, same principles. And so he said a lot of people want to talk about growth. A lot of people want to talk about profits and beating the market. And he goes, that's all well and good, but that's the hardest thing to do because isn't that what everybody's trying to do? You're up against every single person who's trying to grow. That is the hardest thing. And it's the hardest thing because like it's really hard. So he goes, how do you just even get there? Invert the question and say, flip it upside down and say, instead of saying, how do I grow and how do I create a gajillion-dollar company or, whatever these people want to do, he said, how do I not lose what I have? How do I not lose the money that I have invested? Don't take it out when the market goes down. Don't spend more than I make. And it's like, those things are very easy, but the majority of people miss those. So they're actively dumping money down the trash and trying to invest over here. Well, you can't even leave the investments in long enough because you just dumped all the money you needed to live, making ridiculous choices. So you then can't grow because you got to take it out to live, that kind of thing. So when we're considering growth in ministries, how do we grow? How do we get more volunteers? And the inversion is how I've come to a lot of these solutions over the years working with ministry leaders. It's like, how do they get more volunteers so they can sustain the services and meet the needs? And it's like, well, maybe we forget about growing the volunteers. How do you not lose the volunteers you have? And I put myself in the shoes of the volunteers, and it's like, well, I've been a volunteer. What are all the frustrations I've had? And how could those be solved? And so that's where a lot of these different models on attracting volunteers, and I think we're going to make a whole course on this. We'll go over that more in depth, how to create a volunteer, I don't like that word, but an intern system or a discipleship system within the church, which is a volunteer system that attracts people. But so the inversion method makes it simple because the path to growth is 3 steps. It's number one, I guess it's 4 steps. Number one, you have to be thinking correctly about the world. If you think that the world, like let's say you can get in your car and get in your car with and no endpoint on your GPS and then end up in the right place, it's ridiculous. So you have to think properly. And that's like the church has no clear vision. Well, that's like every other church I talk to. So you have to think correctly about the world. Then you have to put the right strategy in place based on your thinking about the world. So correct thinking, then a strategy. What's your vision? What's your mission? What's your goals? What do we need people to do? Where are we taking them? What's the promised land? That's all in the strategy we went through in the strategy course for anyone watching. Proper thinking, proper strategy. Then you have to sustain, you have to be sustainable long enough to get the growth. That's the whole process. So when it comes to inversion, inversion uh, is a sustaining mental model. If you're trying to get to the growth, inversion tells you how do you not lose what you have so you can last long enough to figure out how to get the growth. You have to be there to receive the blessing. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, Occam's razor. This is relatively simple. Guy named Occam created a decision-making tool that basically says the simplest answer is the best. I believe this was in response to conspiratorial thinking, where you have the secret cabal behind the scenes controlling things. And I don't know what field he was in, but maybe philosophy or something. But, so he said, well, really, just probabilistically, the most simple solution is the most likely solution. And so, for example, if I hear hoofbeats sitting here in my office, I'm not going to think zebras. It's more complicated. How do we get zebras in the middle of Hawaii? Did the zoo, like, that they broke out of the zoo, like in the movie, what's it, Madagascar? They made a zoo break, and now like, what is that? It's probably a horse. There's farms around, and it's a horse, and someone's on a paid tourist horse ride. That's way more probable, and it's more simple. And so this is true in apologetics. If you're talking to an atheist you say, well, where did the universe come from? Let's say there's a big bang. Science seems to point to a big bang. It came from the multiverse. There's an infinite number of universes out there, and we're just on the lucky one. Okay, hold on a second. Firstly, there's no evidence of this. So this is a faith claim, and you're telling me you have faith that there is now an unexplainable number of infinite universes that we came from. I just believe there's one God who made the universe. What's more likely? Occam's razor says one God that designed something that looks designed. You're telling me there's an infinite number of unexplainable universes that didn't design anything, and we're just here because we got lucky. That is a bigger faith claim than me as a theist claiming what they would call the sky daddy. It's like, I have less faith than you because that is completely opposite to Occam's razor. So it's generally true in systems. Again, none of these are hard and fast. They're general models, just general wisdom that can line up with reality and give us more insight into a lot of things. Okay, so let's see here. This is good. We're right on track. Okay, this is my favorite one. And I've been doing some trainings on this. So this is called win-win thinking. And I think people generally know what this means, but maybe not to the level of depth. And this is the way in which I try to run everything, because it properly incentivizes. Have we talked about win-lose and win-win yet at all? A little bit?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Awesome. Again, I talked so much, it's like I forget. So in ministries, and you see a lot of these overlap, which is why you can apply a few of them to every problem. And as you get more comfortable, they get more obvious as to when to apply which one. But when you have this volunteer system where it's like, well, come in and sacrifice for the Lord, and the pastor's overwhelmed, so you need to come and just take some off their shoulders, and this kind of mentality, you owe it to the Lord to serve the church. And okay, is that a win-win? It's a win for the pastor for sure, because they get a little off their shoulders, but is it a win for the other person? Well, in the sort of biblical mindset, well, we're not worried about win-win. I sacrifice for the Lord and they sacrifice for the Lord. Well, in this case, it sounds like you're really just getting something at their expense. And that's the way they see it. And if you have a win and they have a lose, they're not going to stick around very long. You can call it unpious, like whatever you want. It's not going to work. That's just not how it functions. And not only that, if you really think about that from the other side of like the win-lose, if you're on the losing end of that, it actually looks really selfish. They don't even care about me. They're just using me to get stuff done in the church. And that is why volunteer systems and even pastorals, like why do pastors burn out? Because they're working so hard and they're not getting the growth they want. and they're losing all of the resources and they're not seeing an increase. Well, they're on the end of a system that puts them in a lose position. Granted, in many cases, they're making the system, which is unfortunate. But anyway, so win-win is when you design a system where both parties or all parties, which is the really fun stuff, are not only winners, they're super enthusiastic winners. They're so excited, they can't even handle it. And not only that, they they think they actually think that they're winning at the expense of someone else. So we have an intern right now who's awesome, and her name's Sophie. She's been here for 6 months. We train 6 hours a week in person, and then she does just a ton of work outside of this. She's doing like 30 hours a week on an unpaid internship. And she is getting to design web pages for huge organizations like the Salvation Army and whole websites for clients that are in her portfolio. She's starting to run the team of interns. So she finished in January, and she's like, well, I was like, would you like to stay? Some people want to stay, some people don't. I'm not going to be the person that says, "Oh, I need a volunteer and I trained you and now you or something like that." She's like, "That's what my church is doing. I want to move over to the media and the digital from the cleaning, but they're saying that they need me for the cleaning but I have to do both." And it's like, so there's this guilt on the other. And I'm like, listen, I'm not going to guilt you. If you want to stay, you can stay. If you got too much going on, you did 6 months, you were very diligent, you got all the references you want, you're awesome. She's like, well, I wouldn't want to take advantage of your time. I wouldn't want to be a burden because of how much time you give me. And I was like, okay, hold on, let's back up. You missed it. We haven't, I don't think we talked about win-win in the 6 months, but I was like, I don't set up systems where I lose. I set up systems where you win and you win so good, you think I lose. I was like, think about what you're doing. I give you 6 hours and then you work an additional 22 and you run other people. Like, I'm getting hundreds of hours of work out of this deal. And you think that like, what? No, you missed it. And so then we had a training on how to set up systems where everybody wins. And she's like, well, yeah, I guess if that's how it is, then I would like to stay longer. And so I was like, okay, well, here's what we'll do. Since you have this amount of training now, I want to give you real client work and I want you to manage the team. And that's going to go into your portfolio. So now she's building out websites and she's managing a team and she's starting to manage a team, which is higher level work, but like all of that is going to be completely available to her. But that's a win for me and it's a win for her. And so she didn't even see it because it was such a big win. And I had to explain to her, no, 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 when you go set up systems, this is how you have to set them up. And then she's like, oh, okay, I get it. Now, maybe building on that just a little bit, you always want to set up a win-win system. And so, for example, I'll go back to the single inner city moms, because I worked with an organization. It was so fun because you could just see like the light bulbs going on. Well, we want to reach out to single inner city moms. Okay, great. Well, that's the majority of the people in our churches were single inner city moms, or they are, but they're very inconsistent. All right, cool. Well, what are you doing for them? We have a Bible study. Okay, so you have a Bible study and then you just call it a single inner city mom's Bible study. Well, no, we just want them to come to it. Okay, so you just have a normal Bible study and you're just hoping that these ladies come to it. Yeah. Okay. Well, firstly, have you questioned if maybe they need a Bible study as their first and most important thing? So we want to, number one, meet the need. Well, no, we never thought about that. What do they actually need? And it's like, well, how would you find out? How about we go through their daily routine? They start up, they wake up, they're super broke. They're super stressed. They get the kids ready. They take them to daycare. They go to daycare. They drop the kids off. They go to work. They work probably more hours than you do. They're exhausted. They go pick the kids up. They go home. They make dinner. They go to bed and then they do it all again. They have no time for fun. They have no times for friends, and they're trapped. So do they need a Bible study or can they not even have time to come to church? Oh, that's probably why they're not showing up. So what do we need to do? We need to solve an actual problem. Jesus didn't give fishermen a Bible study. He gave them fish, right? So what do we need to do? How about job training, right? How do you increase your dollar per hour pay so you don't have to work as much and you can get more time with your family? You want single moms? Give them that. And then how about a night off? have them come over, ask them what they want to do, bring in some massage therapists. Like if you really want to spend it up, bring in some massage therapists, give mom, give moms a night off and like a little spa night, take the kids, have the little fun kids night. Okay, now we got plans. You've got some service ideas. All right, where do you get them? Well, and it took us a while. Like this wasn't obvious. They don't hang out in any places. Like you can't go find mom at restaurants. You can't find mom at public parks. Like she's single working mom. There is no time for these things. Where do you find them? And the only place we could come through, and we're going through because they asked the moms in their church, what's your routine look like, or what did it, or what does it? And the routine, the only place those routines intersected was daycare. And so where do you find single inner city moms at daycare? Because that's the only place that they all intersect because they all work in different places. They all, do different, they never out of their house outside of work. So you have to now make a win for the moms and a win for the church, but you have to go meet them at daycare. What do? Go hand out flyers on the front of the daycare? That's exactly how to like get the cops called on you for loitering. And I've had pastors tell me this, like, I've been trying to hand out flyers in the apartment building and they won't let me do it. What do I do? You have to make a win for the manager of the apartment building. You have to meet their biggest need. And so you go into the daycare and you say to the daycare leader, hey, I'm Pastor Karen. I'm over here with the whatever church. We've just been really thinking about you. We've been praying about you. It seems like you're really providing an awesome service for a lot of people in the community. And we have a heart for the same community. What's your biggest problem? How can we serve you? You figure the biggest problem and what's their biggest problem? Well, we need more clients. We need to add value for our clients. Oh, that's awesome. We would love to support you. We'd love to do? We'd actually like to add value to your clients too. How about this? Every 3 months, we want to get every single mom that comes through your daycare. How many do you have? We've got 15. We got 20. Okay. We want to buy them a $150 gift basket, really nice spa, and we want you to give it to them. And the only thing and they're like, whoa, what? Yeah. Like who doesn't want to give their clients that? And then it's like, listen, the only thing we want to do is we just want to put a handwritten note in there and we want to invite them to an evening off at our church, and then talk. And it's like, how could they reject that? You can't reject that. So now daycare wins, mom wins, church wins, and there's no way you can't grow. And so when you implement win-win systems, growth is inevitable. It's just a matter of sustaining long enough to get there. Any thoughts or questions on that?
No, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That one was a little bit emotional. We came around to it and they were really impacted with how that worked out. So that was pretty cool. So as we bring this last training on mental models and decision-making processes to a conclusion, I want to wrap up and maybe give some examples. And we already have some examples, but how do you actually use this process in application? Okay, because it's like, well, okay, we got all these models and 80-20 and locus of control and all this stuff. How do I actually maybe use this on a daily basis? And how do I say this? Like when we're like say we're teaching a disciple or an intern or a volunteer how to write a sermon. They're like, you really do all this stuff? You go to this book and look in that book, and then you have verses and you pull those in, and then you read you read a whole chapter. Like you do what? And then you write it with notes, and then you script it, and then you practice it, and it takes 40 hours a week. It takes 20 hours a week. Like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. But you've been doing it so long, it's just easy. You just are in the flow. You just know how to do it. That's how this works. It's just a muscle. When you start running through decisions in process with these models, you don't even know how to make decisions in any other way. I don't understand how ministry leaders make decisions anymore. They just go, I have a great idea. We had a comment on our blog the other day, and it was like, yeah, we have a church of 30 that includes kids, and the women's have a Bible study. And we said it really wasn't fair that the men didn't, so we made one. There's 30 of you. All of you could go to a different church and have a different Bible study available there. Did anybody even ask if there was a Bible study wanted, or was it just based on fairness? That doesn't make sense. We also run a fleet of vehicles, and we wanted to pay a church for parking. I called up the church and he's like, I'm the parking manager. And I was like, I don't think that's a real thing. Nonetheless, I was like, cool. we've got a small fleet of vehicles. We'd love to park them in your lot and we'd love to pay for it, or bless your ministry, you know? Um, well, we don't really offer that because we have a lot of requests, and it just wouldn't be fair if we gave some people the opportunity to park and others the opportunity to not park. And it's like, okay, fairness isn't a decision-making model. Fairness isn't even a biblical concept, I don't think. Life isn't fair. That's what Jesus got. He didn't get what's fair. What do you mean fair? This is like, everybody's got to get a cookie if I bring cookie to class. Like, what? You're a church. You need money to support your ministry. Take the person who's going to pay you the most for parking and then say, they're funding our ministry. That is an appropriate answer. You can be not fair and take, like, that's okay. Um, and so to that, what am I saying here? I'm getting off track. I'm getting excited here. I'm totally off. I don't know where I was going. Either way, so decision-making process. When you get good at it, it's second nature. Oh, I was saying I don't understand how many ministry leaders make decisions, but like fairness is not, it doesn't correlate with results. It's not really biblical. A lot of unfair things happen for good reasons in the Bible, so that's not a model. So what do we do? Okay, so for example, yesterday, I'll just give you an example from my own personal, walk here. We got an opportunity to take a large client that is grossing like somewhere around 10 million a year. It's coming in through a godly guy that I work with, a media buyer, and he's trying to close the account. He's like, will you take the ads account? Okay. So first for me, is God telling me this? So we're going through the actual steps here. Is God telling me miraculously and unexplainably to do something that makes no sense? No, I'm not. I'm not hearing any miraculous stuff. And hey, sometimes it happens. And if that's the case, I'd do it. But that's not the case. I just feel like I have to make a wise decision. Okay. Secondly, is it biblical? Well, I don't know. Because I will be white labeling and I will be running the services for this other marketing company, I don't have all the details on the account. So now I'm limited with what I know. He said that the individual, the marketer who's talking to me, the guy that owns this company, is a strong believer. We're close. He's got a number of accounts with us. And he generally works with good people. He said this is a sane client and it's not a problem client. And he just wants to know what's going on. Basically, his other marketing firm is not doing their job. Okay, so that's good. It's a $10 million a year business. Okay, so now I need details. And then the next thing is, okay, so is it biblical to take a client if I don't know if they're Christian or not? Well, sure. Like, sure, you can work with non-Christian clients and share the Lord through your great work and work as though you're working to the Lord. Not a problem. So that's the next model. Is it in line with the vision? I don't know if it's a Christian company. They sell circus tents. And I don't typically take clients. Like if I just had a client book through the website and they're like, hey, we sell circus tents. Are you a Christian circus tent company? No, probably not for us. You should probably just go to someone who just does normal marketing. We're a little more specialized. But this is coming in through a Christian client who is himself sharing the Lord with his clients, and he's got a lot of, so it's a little bit more nuanced. So it's like, okay, it's not directly in line with the vision. Can it be in line with the vision? Is there a way that we can use this account to further helping ministry leaders reach more people more effectively? Well, I would definitely be training my interns on this account, because this is going to be like a high performing account. I could have video editors block out the numbers and names, and then we could make it available on the course. And it's like, hey, here's how to build out a $10 million, or excuse me, they're spending like a couple 100,000, 6 figures a year. Here's how to manage a 6 figure a year advertising account. And then ministry leaders get to see high level training. Okay, that's fairly reasonable. Or Christian business people. All right, so it could probably be brought in line with it. Okay, so then beyond that, 80-20. Is this going to be one of the 20% of the clients that brings in the most fruit? Or is it going to be one of the 80% that is the most problems just all over the place? Is it going to eat up my whole life for, a few $1,000s a month? It's not worth it. And that's crazy because it's still a few $1,000s, but I can't lose all my time because then I'm going to lose the ability to manage all the other systems. So I'm going to look at 80-20. Locus of control. Can I actually influence and control this account, or are they micromanaging and changing things all the time? Am I going to be the only person in this account, me and my team? Or am I not even going to have full control because I can't make a functional system if I have other people in there just doing whatever they want. So I want to know locus of control. Um, what are the second order consequences in the business? If I take, and this would be close to asymmetric too, if I take the client, if I take this opportunity and it does turn out, especially he said you're going to need to be on call for basically the first 2 months. Okay. So this could take a lot of time and they're paying a lump sum up front. So they want to pay for that extra time. But what do I do in the meantime? Because if I don't touch the business for 2 months, the downside on that is, yeah, okay, we make a chunk of cash, but then a bunch of other clients leave or a bunch, who knows what happens. There's a large downside. And so the money's still not worth it. Okay. So if that's the case, what are the second order consequences of accepting the first 2 months and the high workload? I could lose a lot if I don't have a system set up in advance to take it. And so, one thing I'm considering is like, we've got this intern who's awesome, brilliant. She's strategizing high level marketing strategies and learning to run a team. Could I have her ready and offer her pay to actually run stuff for those 2 months and maybe longer so that I can take that? And can I actually depend on her to do that? Like, is she really in it? Because I would actually have to let go entirely if this account takes up my whole life for a couple months. So second order consequences is if I take it, everything else could tank, and that's not worth it because that makes me unsustainable. And do I have strategic stuff in place to take what I have to let go of if I take it? So that is another example. Bottleneck. Bottlenecks, there's a lot of technical stuff with tracking the results. Like, are we getting sales and can we track exactly how much? That can take coding, that can take stuff that I will just never solve fast enough. And so we recently solved this at the beginning of the year because I would have just had to turn it down because of the level of complexity of setting some stuff like this up. But we got a guy who specializes in tracking, who was with Google for 7 years, and he's great and he's on time and he shows up. Do I have any bottlenecks that relate to this account? No, we just solved it. So I know my guy, Neil can take care of that. Okay. So I don't have anything that's going to extend this out. Margin of safety. What is it that they're paying and what is my hourly rate? If I put in 10 hours a month on the average month after setup, what's my hourly rate if it requires 20 hours a month? Am I still in a profitable zone? And how many hours am I able to invest and still be in a profitable zone so I'm sustainable with the business? And then I can tell my colleague, okay, we can really give you a lot on the first 2 months, but after that, we can do 15 hours a month on this account, and that's the very most I can do. So I'm going to tell you when that's up, and then we're up. And I just want to let you know on the front end that's sustainable. I can't help other ministries and ministry leaders if I'm losing money on all the clients and then we're out of business. So that's just, again, it's not selfish, it's just logical. And actually it's unselfish because I want to make sure I can still show up for Pastor Karen, who's like, where did Brett go? Oh, I got hung up in bottlenecks and control issues on some ads account that I didn't really think through. So that's another example there. Margin of safety. Critical mass. How long is it going to take to get that account functioning? How complex are the issues? It sounds like there are some pretty complex issues. So what do I tell? I haven't even seen the account, which makes this particularly difficult, but it's like, what do I tell my colleague on how long I can do it? I need more information on the account, but typically it's like 90 days to 120 days for a full build and to start seeing conversions and sales and start optimizing those things. Okay. So that's generally what is the critical mass. And not only that, if he's investing $10,000 a month into his ads, we can probably do it a little faster given that we have everything we need. So what's the critical mass? Inversion might be like, okay, I don't want to take this account and how do I grow ClickMill and take this account? How do I take this account and not tank the company? And big accounts are very dicey for companies because you put so much resources into them, and then if you lose them, you're left with nothing. So it's like if you take a large account, you have to make sure you're not spending any of that money and it's all gravy and it goes to the bank. So if for any reason you lose the big account, you don't also lose the business. So don't grow the income. Okay, so all of that's coming out of inversion thinking? How do I just not, how do I take the account and not grow the company? How do I just not tank the company?
Mhm.
Um, Win-win. Is this a win for my, is it a win for the client? Is it a win for my colleague who's going to be white labeling with us? And is it a win for me? So I'm making sure that all of those things are in place. So those are some ways in which I would think. So starting, is there like a miraculous reason that I just have to do it and I'm just going to do it because God said so? Move to Antarctica. Okay. If that's not the case, is it biblical? It's biblical. Does it fit with the vision? If it's enough and it's coming through a Christian guy who's ministering to his clients, so I'm okay with it, even though I probably wouldn't typically take it. But then beyond that, it's like, give me one moment. I'm going to let Zachary in. He's coming in for our next call. Um, but then beyond that, does the account hit symmetry, asymmetry? What are half-lives, batching, 80/20 locus of control, second order consequences, which is the strategic thinking, bottlenecks, margin of safety? I'm running through all of these to assess if it fits between all of it. I can only take so many things, and anytime I take something, I got to lose something. So is it going to produce better fruit than the things that I have? Because if it does not, I'm not being a good steward of the things God has already given me. I'm literally accepting less than I had. And you're here, Pastor Karen. God, puts you here for whatever reason he put you here. And I'm going to take something that then makes me drop people who are actually already showing up and have been consistent. Like that's not good stewardship. So that would be biblical mental model application when making decisions.
Okay.
Any thoughts or questions on that?
No, I think I just need to put it in practice.
Yeah, and just pick one. Just pick one and try. Like, does this apply to the vision? Or just pick like Half-Life and just say, when am I making decisions over and over every day? And how do I just make them one time so I don't have to make them again? And just practice them in the little things. And when
Yeah.
you apply them in the little things, then they will compound and you'll just start using multiple in different areas, like 80/20. Track every minute of your time for a week, run it
Hmm.
into like ChatGPT, which we'll get into, by the way, we'll get into training, run that whole schedule into ChatGPT and say, break my schedule into timeframes and topics. And it'll say, you spend 17 hours putting on, I'm not saying you do this, I'm just making something up, putting on your makeup every week. 17 hours. Like, all right, how do I optimize a little bit here and get some of those back? And so 80/20. So you can just practice a couple of these here and there throughout the week and they get super natural. And the more you try them, the more you're like, oh my gosh, I could do this here. I could do that there. And then you're working smarter, not harder. And you're cutting out the things that didn't work anyway. So
Yeah. Awesome.
awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the trainings on decision making, which is probably one of the most important things that I teach, not to downplay anything else, but we will get into a different subject in the future. And I'm going to go through everything and see what we want to move into next. So I'm not going to make any promises yet. Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Awesome. Hey, God bless. You have a wonderful week.
Thank you. You too.